Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. It's really good to be with you this fine Monday, and may I say, the weekend's series of No Kings protests were both far worse and far more mediocre than I was expecting. First of all, I would like to issue a word of thanks to as crazy as it sounds, to the Democrats in my home city of Indianapolis, many of whom were rained out. And a lot of those protests, as we know, are rather fair weather protests and riots. They did not assault any cops or not any kind of great graffiti, at least not that I'm told. So thanks. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, the rest of the country could not say the same. And this not only has taken place on Saturday, their No Kings Day, which everyone made fun of for very good reason. But this also has continued into today. There are still pockets of rioting which are going on in Seattle, in Washington in general, a little bit in Portland, which Portland is just kind of always rioting a little bit in some kind of weird Brownian movement. I'm pretty sure that there will forever be rioting until Portland is burnt to the ground, as it rightly deserves at this point, so that they can at least rebuild a city free of riots, which would be quite the task. And Los Angeles, of course, you have people of various genders running up to U.S. Marines and yelling at them. And I do actually mean you have some of the goofiest goobers around running up to Marines, to National Guardsmen, who again are just protecting federal buildings and property. Trump has not invoked the Insurrection Act, though there is a hearing tomorrow where the appeals court will hear why Gavin Newsom should be able to break federal law and wrest the National Guard away from the Commander-in-Chief and the Department of Defense. But at the moment, right now, what you have are goofy goobers who are running up to the Marines and saying things as though it's a very, very lame game of ding-dong-ditch. So up first, we have a guy who walks up and says, "You," just talking to some Marine, who again doesn't get to choose where he goes, by the way, just starts yelling at him and says, "You're disrespecting a union worker."
Disrespecting the union man. What skill you trying to get in the Marines? What did the recruiter tell you?
He says, "What skill are you trying to get out of the Marines? What job were you going to get? What skill are you trying to get?" Which I guess is kind of oh, if only you were as cool as me, you would have the skills of a union worker. Which, by the way, like a lot of great tradesmen, I've never heard of a tradesman trying to say he was better than a Marine because he knew some kind of secret skills. No, that's one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. But the Marine is just standing there because he doesn't care who this guy is. "I'm talking to you." The Marine just doesn't care. And so the guy just walks away. Fantastic. This does, in fact, remind me of a Vine from 2016 where this kid is, I guess, arguing with someone, and he says in response,
I don't think you're disrespecting a future U.S. Army soldier.
You're disrespecting, how dare you disrespect me, a union worker? Okay, I ain't got anything against union workers, but I'm pretty sure that being stationed in a place isn't exactly disrespectful to anyone, I guess, except, rioters. Now, of course, Los Angeles is in a perpetual state of nonsense and rioting and all constants. Now, however, they're learning how to convince the rest of the American people. So, look, let's be real. Most of us haven't been convinced by the protests and the riots yet. I'm sure that seeing a bunch of the weird elderly and out of shape, and then the people flying the Mexican flag and the Honduran flag and the Nicaraguan flag and the Venezuelan flag instead of the American flag, which those that flew it upside down, which again, I'm amazed that that's totally okay. Again, flying the flag upside down once again is fine. Those crews, they haven't really convinced us yet. But here you go. If you're looking to be convinced, the left has figured it out. A group of Los Angeles, definitely just protesters, held a little mini rally outside of the Hilton. And they spray painted F-ice all over the Hilton, and they had themselves a little high school pep rally session. Let's join.
We don't take orders from the Hilton, do we? No!
So this guy's so passionate. "We don't take orders from the Hilton, do we?" And they go, "No." And the guy's like, "F no." Like, he's ready to go. Like, he's got like "No Hilton" tattooed on his chest just above his genders. asking you to take orders from the Hilton. Okay, those of you who are from California, we do have some in the chat tonight. I'm serious when I ask you this. Does the Hilton hold like a lot of sway over LA? Like in the morning, do you have to bow down to a picture of Paris? I'm in all reality, I'm not really aware of the Hilton running LA. But he continues, because it's not just LA, it's not just the Hilton that can't give the ICE people, or excuse me, these rioters orders.
Right. We don't take orders from the LAPD, right? And we don't take orders from the opportunists trying to take this somewhere else where it's not going to have any impact.
So he finishes up, and I'm sorry for all the beeps, but the only word that they really know is the F word, and then also decolonization, that group of white people. So they're holding their sign that says dare to struggle. Struggle. It was very poorly written. And they're saying that we're not going to let anyone go have us protest somewhere where it's not going to make an impact. Because I'm sure that I was convinced after seeing this. I was like, yeah, forget the Hilton, resist, start changing my bedding every day, you jerks. Yeah, that showed them. All right. And then over in Portland, the same kinds of nonsense, again, just perpetually over the weekend and into today. So you have Portland Antifa people, otherwise known as dropouts of any Ivy League school in junior year. So they're screaming at, again, riot police or federal agents or whomever that are just standing outside a location. And one of these girls, at least I think so, kind of hard to tell, goes up and chucks liquid on a federal officer, which is a crime. That is, in fact, not just assault, but I'm guessing that's not just water. Here, have some mist on a hot summer day. I'm guessing that's not it. And so the officers move in to arrest the individual. And then the crowd responds by immediately pulling her back away, because if there's anything you need to know about these riots, and I learned this on the ground when I was in Chicago for the DNC, they are all complicit in this crime. Every single one of them. I love how Mary Poppins runs forward with the umbrella there. That's a little special for me. Like, here's the totes umbrella that I got from that Hilton. Yeah, mostly peaceful. I was assured. Now, Seattle had kind of two problems. So they did have the violence, of course, and again, here's the Seattle violence. Now, we have had to, this is outside of Seattle, to be clear. We do have to mute this because there's just too much to bleep out. So for those who are listening, it is a group of Antifa thugs, children, who are attacking on broad daylight on the street a veteran who's walking down the street. They start assaulting him, piling up on him, kicking him, punching him. And when someone goes up to record it, someone shoves an LED, basically a media disruption flashlight, and then threatens to assault the person carrying the camera. So, by the way, as far as I'm concerned, I want to make this clear. For rioters, if you switch from rubber ammunition to lead, those things will probably clear up a lot faster. And if you assault someone in a riot, or in Salt Lake City, if you have an individual who we believe right now, according to Andy No, who fired on someone and killed them with a firearm. We believe at this point, it looks from the shot like he was trying to kill someone he thought was like a person wearing a MAGA hat, was a Trump supporter, but ended up, because again, these people have the intelligence of chewed crayons, ended up shooting someone on his own side. This investigation is still ongoing, but again, shooting people in Salt Lake City. Now, some of the other horrible crimes and really lame moments, because it was just one of the two, we're going to get into, but we have to send the radio crew over to commercial. Stay on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. Okay, so in Seattle, there was a moment that was just more lame than anything else. And this is when some child, and I sure hope it is, because otherwise, my God, dude, you need to go to the gym immediately. Someone took the time to make a piñata Make America Great Again hat, which, first of all, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't own a Trump hat until the middle of the second campaign. Right after Trump was shot at, I actually ended up buying a Make America Great Again hat while I was at the RNC covering it because I was infuriated, like a lot of Americans. And we'll get to that into NPR actually later on in the show. Someone took the time to make a Make America Great Again hat out of a piñata. Just before we even start this, I got to clarify, if you are so obsessed with Donald Trump that to get back at him, you are making statues and pictures of him as a baby, Trump masks, Trump t-shirts, you're drawing pictures of him with a Burger King crown on his head, you're out there with a Make America Great Again piñata that you spent all this time on, honey, dear sweetie baby, you need to be doing something better with your time. And Bill Maher, by the way, on the left, made the point, we're not going to play the clip, that if only the liberals were this passionate about elections, they might have done better in 24. But anyway, here is the string noodle child going at a Make America Great Again piñata. He's going at it. Hasn't actually broken the piñata yet. Oh, he didn't succeed. Okay, or it didn't succeed. Hot take here, just for all of you out there. When you complain about political rhetoric and violence, and then you go around, again, burning effigies and swinging bats and saying it's mostly peaceful, or like Nancy Pelosi said about the burned cars, it's just over exuberance, and you don't want to really say, well, actually, there's a lot of justification. A lot of people are mad at United Healthcare. A lot of people are mad at Israel if you need to assassinate people. And New York, like the United Healthcare case with Luigi Mangione, or the guy who shot two young adults about to be engaged in Washington, D.C., or like the crazed individual who set women and children on fire in Boulder, Colorado. And to be clear, on Friday, I said Aurora, Colorado by mistake. That's because we broadcast to a station there, and I issued the correction, but it was later in the show. In Boulder, Colorado, with the individual lighting people on fire, now you have this aggravated increasing the political temperature of violence. And that led to a horrible, horrible situation in Minnesota over the weekend when a guy named Vance Bolter, tracked down and shot two Minnesota state senators. So ended up shooting John and Yvette Hoffman and Melissa and Mark Hortman by showing up to the building dressed as a police officer. And it is one of the more disgusting, despicable crimes that I have heard no one on the right, to be clear, suggest was in any way, shape, or form a good thing, even though these two individuals who were targeted were both Democrats, one of whom had recently voted against illegal immigrant health care reform, essentially taking health care aid away from the taxpayer docket for illegal immigrants in Minnesota. Immediately, people came out, said this is a politically motivated attack. In the guy's car were a bunch of No Kings flyers. And I was reminded that Tim Walz had just got up in front of the country and suggested to a bunch of South Carolina Democrats that they really needed to be a lot meaner. And given
called out on this
what's
because
going on,
I called Donald Trump a wannabe dictator. It's because he is. It's because he is. Oh.
So we're going to come back in a second. We got to bring the radio crew back from commercial. We'll talk about this a bit more. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
So a lot of this violence culminated in a way over the weekend with a horrible, disgusting series of politically motivated murders that you hear the hesitance in my voice to go outright and declare a whole lot of stuff about this because there is simply a whole lot left, though they do finally have the guy that we don't know. And producer Nick has gone all over the interwebs and investigation materials this afternoon, talking about individuals who, again, again, Melissa and Mark Hortman, who were in fact shot and killed. John and Yvette Hoffman, the surviving victims. We can get into a lot more details when we do know more. But right now, what is clear is there's a lot of evidence that suggests that this guy is mentally insane. And there's stuff that suggests that he has affiliations with the far right, with affiliations with the far left. We do not know. We don't know yet. And before we start digging into a whole lot on this individual and what he has done and what he hasn't done, and whether or not he was directly appointed because, did Tim Walz actually know this guy, or was he appointed to the governor's workforce development board in Minnesota because he was just someone that was recommended? We don't know yet. We don't. And so instead of making a bunch of claims yet about this individual, instead, I want to point out a piece of coverage from the NPR that I think perfectly encapsulates why, as a country, we continue, and I mean continually, keep finding ourselves in a situation in which there are brutal, horrible political murders and attacks and violence that are not just occurring sporadically, they're now escalating. So the NPR, the crew over there, wrote an article. This would be Meg Anderson from Minneapolis, Rachel Treisman in Washington, D.C., and Russell Lewis in Birmingham. And they wrote kind of an article outlining what they called a series of rising political attacks in the United States, which, by the way, if you look at it as a whole, politically motivated attacks over the last couple of years have been vastly, vastly more on the far left side of the aisle and politically motivated in the effort of what they call fighting fascism, which is, again, just anything that the far left doesn't like. And instead of being directly condemned, which, by the way, immediately after this attack, I saw every single Republican, both on the influencer side, on the media side, in the political sphere, all the way from the president down to local and state officials, condemned this murder like every murder, condemned this attack like every attack. Said this individual needs to be found. He needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. There were a lot of people like yours truly who said that when he's caught and when he's convicted, he needs to be publicly hanged, because anyone who commits these horrible, disgusting, despicable acts of violence, especially politically motivated violence, which is domestic terrorism, by definition, intimidation politically through violence, that kind of an action deserves a guy hanging at the end of a rope, period, because they need to be made an example. So, those things said, the left does not do this. And I'm making this very clear that when there is a murder like this, the left first waits to go, wait a second, well, let me hear more about him. Well, what did he or she do? And why? Were they misgendered? Was the rhetoric a little bit sharp? Do they feel threatened by ICE, or threatened by Trump, or threatened by Republicans? Maybe they were mad about losing health care. And all of these justifications start coming forward until you have people like Taylor Lorenz openly saying that, again, Luigi Mangione in Washington, D.C. did nothing wrong, or the pro-Palestinians supporting the murderer in Washington, D.C. Well, he was really angry about Israel, which is why it's fine to shoot an evangelical Baptist from the center of the country. And this kind of rhetoric breeds this horrible stuff. And I have been pointing this out and predicting that this is exactly where we would end up. And so the NPR article on this string of violence ends in one of the most despicable ways I have ever seen a piece of media. So again, we've went over it in the first segment. You know all of the political violence that's occurred in the last couple of years. We've talked about them at length, ad infinitum, because there are consistent, horrible events that happen on a regular basis, which is why I encourage those who are listening to the show or watching the show to learn to carry, and learn to carry responsibly. Because these acts of political violence are increasing. They are not going to slow down, because right now the entire leadership of the Democratic Party, the entire leadership save John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, everyone else, maybe Shapiro of Pennsylvania, sometimes Polis of Colorado, every single leader of the Democrat Party right now has tut-tutted and soft-handed this and said, well, NPR, quote, last year, the Brennan Center for Justice, a policy think tank, released a report saying nearly half of the state lawmakers it surveyed had experienced threats or attacks in recent years. At the federal level, the U.S. Capitol Police has documented a spike in threats against members of Congress. This is true. And last summer, President Trump, who has often been criticized for stoking the intense emotions that can lead to political violence in the first place, survived an assassination attempt that left his ear bloodied and killed a person in the crowd. That's disgusting. That is absolutely disgusting. Now, you may say, oh, well, in an article like this, if you're writing a news article or even an analysis article, if you make a statement like that, you better have some sources. There should be a hyperlinked sentence where that shows me who are the some who are saying, well, Donald Trump did this all anyway. Show me. It should be a senator, presidential candidate, a major media policy group, someone with the weight to say this is Trump's fault. Does NPR do that? Nope, just complete opinion. From Meg Anderson in Minneapolis or Rachel Treisman in Washington, D.C. and Russell Lewis in Birmingham. So when NPR CEO gets in front of Congress and says, there's no political bias that I'm aware of over here, this is a clear, definitive example of the kind of bias in the media where they'll say, by the way, there's this bad stuff going on, and someone out there in the wide blue yonder says that it's all Donald Trump's fault for getting shot at. And then, once again, they give some kind of an out to the next shooter, to the next firebomber, to the next pipe bomber, to the next assassin. And on and on and on. As long as you give them an out, well, some people probably feel, justified because after all, Donald Trump is a really terrible, stinky, evil dictator, Hitler reincarnated in the United States. And that doesn't put Trump at risk, although it absolutely does, but he doesn't put Trump at risk as much as it puts you at risk. Because Trump is surrounded by security, the Secret Service, 24/7. And they still throw attacks at him. And obviously, he is 100% threatened. But you, if you are suspected of being a Republican, if you have the wrong kind of sticker on your car, the wrong kind of sign in your yard, you could be doxxed and attacked. That's not fear-mongering. That is the truth at this point in time in our country. And it doesn't matter if you go to protest at a walk to stand in solidarity with the hostages held in Gaza from an apolitical group who's just going to host a Sunday walk. Some angry, crazed, illegal immigrant can show up and throw homemade firebombs and spray homemade pyrotechnical crap out of a weed sprayer at women and children. It is here, it is in this country right now. And it is inflamed specifically because the last 15 years, Democrats have been allowed by the rest of the country to tell each and everyone out there, well, after all, Republicans are really mean fascist dictators, and whatever you have to do to stop this colonial, homophobic, transphobic, racist, on and on and on, blankety blank, unprintable. Now, over to the news side of things again. On the contrast, now we take a look at Trump's actual actions right now, which are not exactly the kingly dictatorial stuff that I was promised. So Trump set up for this weekend on the 250th birthday of the United States Army a parade. And again, the media lost their minds in advance for this. You had Senator Richard Blumenthal suggesting that, oh, this is terrible. Fascism has come here again.
I'm Richard Blumenthal, senator from Connecticut, and I have something to say.
No one has ever asked what a senator from Connecticut has to say ever. If there is one thing watching the United States Senate in the last several years has encouraged me to do, is to not take the state of Connecticut seriously ever at all. Period. Ever. Radio crew, sorry, we got to let you head over to commercial. We're going to continue this on the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Donald Trump is throwing himself a military parade. In effect, a birthday celebration for himself, not a parade for the Army.
Okay, so that's the claim. And then you saw Joy Behar on The View making the same claim. Oh, this is a good birthday for Donald Trump.
Tanks will be rolling through the nation's capital.
Tanks? Oh, no. Oh.
Along with 7,000 marching soldiers to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States Army. There will also be no Kings demonstrations around the country to protest Trump.
And shoot people.
And it happens to be his 79th birthday. What a coincidence.
Yes, because Donald Trump both picked his birthday and picked the birthday of the U.S. Army. It just so happened. Donald Trump, when he was little, he's like, yes, I'm going to be in office right when the Army turns 250. It's the perfect plan. So let's take a look at this. The actual Army parade was one of the most relaxed and enjoyable events I've sat through. I did. I watched it because I was on Merit TV providing a little bit of color commentary for the day. And while I watched it, here's what I saw. A really basic military parade. The troops weren't goose-stepping through Washington. It was a very relaxed march. Soldiers were in different dress from throughout the major wars in history. The Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the World War I, the Korean War, all the way up through the Gulf War and then Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, it was a really incredible thing to see.
Down through history, we've been blessed beyond words by this valiant legion of Army warriors and patriots, heroes and legends. And tonight we affirm with unwavering certainty that in the years ahead and in every generation hence, whenever duty calls and whatever danger comes, the American soldier will be there.
Now, does that sound like the speech of a man who just made this all about his birthday? I've looked. I did. I actually went back through the whole thing. I looked through his speech, which was very short. I looked through other statements. I looked through the words of the vice president, who took the time also on his anniversary, which is also that day, to thank his wife, Usha. Again, family man is one of the reasons that people do, in fact, like this vice president. Donald Trump did not mention himself, other than to say that he has always respected the Army and he thanks them. He talked about their valor throughout history, major operations. He talked about their ideals. The commercials or the videos that were played showed a far more diverse cast of characters than perhaps I was told that the Army was going to be this boys club where women were just going to be kicked out and all the trans be kicked out. It's going to be terrible and mean. There were more women in the documentation of this Army military parade than I have seen in Army recruitment videos through the Obama and the Biden years. Just normal celebratory. The Golden Knights, West Point had guys jump in, airborne style, which is fantastic. You're never going to have me upset that West Point is getting a little bit of function there. And the big action that President Trump did that I thought was incredibly special, just off the cuff here, was he actually participated in the swearing in of new recruits into the Army.
Mr. President, First Sergeant Norton, reporting for duty, sir. Ready to commence the ceremony as directed.
I state your name. Help me God. Congratulations. Welcome to the United States Army and have a great life. Thank you.
Wow, what a terrible, evil dictator that guy is. Oh, the horror. We're going to continue in a second, but we got to bring the radio crew back in from commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Don't go anywhere.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back, by the way, to the Tony Kinnett Cast. It's good to have each and every one of you with us, whether you're joining over on the radio, on live stream, TV. We're really glad to have you here. We're talking a little bit about this horrible, dictatorial, evil, scary. I need like a thunder sound and like a witch's laugh whenever I'm describing how supposedly evil President Trump is. And instead, all that we got was a really relaxed, enjoyable celebration of the U.S. Army. That's it. And of course, you had people over like Jim Acosta and the Lincoln Project, who took a moment away from, hosting individuals who touch little boys, to comment on the military parade and said, oh, this isn't North Korea you're seeing. Jim Acosta's like, oh, this is unreal, a military parade. Oh, no. You guys do realize we celebrated the end of the Gulf War in 91 with a huge national victory celebration parade. And I didn't hear any complaining, by the way, from this crew that was saying, oh, the money that's spent, all of the money that was spent on this parade, when transgender comics were being sent to Colombia, or atheism to be spread in Nepal, or equity work programs in Egypt, or youth programs for inclusion in Gaza, or, Biden's hundreds of millions of dollar pier that sunk into the Mediterranean. Oh, but then celebrating U.S. troops and honoring soldiers. Oh, oh God, please save us. The horror. Even MSNBC and Chris Hayes' crew had to come back and say that actually it was just a normal, decent thing. He was shocked that there was no atmosphere of malevolence.
I will say, I want to go back to you, Allie, that again, when we talk about this sort of tension in the country, and sometimes, you and I have both been at Trump rallies, those can be, very tense, a kind of, I would say, like kind of a dark, malevolent energy sometimes in them. Not always, but it doesn't seem like that's the energy on the mall today, which I think is a good sign, right?
Yeah, and by the way, I've been to a couple of Trump rallies. I don't even really enjoy going to a lot of Trump rallies. They're not my thing. When I was covering them during the election cycle, some of them were great, some of them not so much. It's never been uncomfortable, tense, and foreboding. That's where Trump is a comedian and stands up on the stage telling jokes and going off teleprompter, and he made fun of Biden and he made fun of Kamala, and it was just normal Trump. Violent, intense energy. Get out of here. It's why no one takes this seriously. And by the way, what the Trump administration has also been focused on over the weekend is genuinely one of the most brilliant acts of foreign policy that I've seen in a very long time, because the entire world, some of the books on that shelf behind me, are about the coming US and Iran conflict and how Russia and China and all of this axis of evil is going to... I'm not joking, by the way. I actually have a book on this shelf that's called Northern Storm Rising that I got when I was in like junior high, predicting this super duper alliance between communist China and the pseudo imperialist fascist Russia. And then North Korea was going to send over something or whatever, when they're not starving, to join with Iran, and they were going to fight the West, and it was terrible. And right now, Syria, Hezbollah, Saudi Arabia, Russia, mostly China, North Korea, Turkey, Pakistan, India, Iraq, all of the local region neighbors and or potential allies of Iran, while Israel has been striking critical sites in the region, have essentially said, it's been real, it's been fun, therefore it's been real fun, as they say in Arabic, shalom. So we hope you guys are having a wonderful... seriously, that's Russia, who we were told, I was promised World War III, thermonuclear, Geddon, Sheboygan, whatever, and it was nothing. It's nothing. Israel has bent Iran over its knee and is spanking it repeatedly. And Trump, as a masterclass of diplomacy, has ensured that so far, the United States is getting to dangle, do you want to make a deal, in front of the Iranians like meat on a fishing hook in a child's cartoon. So Trump said, you're going to want to make a deal. You're going to make a deal. No enrichment of uranium or plutonium or any of that. You're going to make a deal with me, Donald Trump, and it's going to be great. You're going to stop going after the Jews and the Christians and your women. You should take the deal. Otherwise, this Netanyahu guy, he's got a wild look. I don't know. Maybe they should take the deal. And they didn't. He gave him 60 days. And on the 61st day, after the Ayatollah said, death to America, death to Israel, death to your honor, your cow, your family, all that nonsense, Trump, in my greatest estimation, said, all right, Bibi, give it to him. And they have. And Iran has thrown most of what we expect to be its ballistic arsenal back at Israel at this point. They've established total air superiority. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. But right now, what we are seeing from Donald Trump is a diplomatic masterclass, because all Trump has come forward and said, are you ready to make a deal? What's behind door number one? Your only chance. Take it. Nope. Nothing. And so now Trump has got on Truth Social as of this evening and has said everyone should evacuate from Tehran, which, by the way, is what Israel media has been broadcasting today, because the bombings are becoming rougher as Iran has begun targeting direct civilian areas because, it's Iran. And so through this process, now we have video and we have confirmed. Who are those individuals on the side of the road? Oh, why, that would be in Tehran, and that would be a massive prison break currently. We are also getting reports of minor civil unrest because the regime of the Ayatollahs may, in fact, finally be moving on out. And so far, the United States has done very, very little at all, except join Syria, join the Saudis and the UK, and even a missile battery in Iraq at shooting down some of the things that Iran has thrown. They're blowing all the way through it. all the way through Iran's stockpile. And I've heard well, you don't know if Iran has a super duper extra super secret stockpile. Some of the defectors that have left Iran have stated, no, they're burning through it like a cheap lawnmower through gasoline. And, even though the Obama era individuals are losing their mind, oh, this is horrible. You could do this to these dear people. Why don't we just give them pallets of money? And the Israelis are, at this point, not holding back. Again, here's the Iranian state TV, the same network that has aired the beating of women on national television as a celebration, being taken off the air by, airmail. Boy, she seems pleasant, doesn't she? When you like going home to that every day, walking in the door, like, oh God, I'm sorry, dear. She's like, it's time to get out of here. Quoth the Raven, mess around and find out. Now, there are some on the right, on the right side of the aisle, that are very upset, that think that this means that we're going to have forever war. No, I have yet to see the major calls for boots on the ground, that we're going to go in, that we need to occupy Iran, that we need to, set up checkpoints in Iran and all this stuff. No, I'm not seeing calls for it. I'm not. The most I'm seeing calls for is that the U.S. flies some sorties over with the B-2 and drop the bunker buster on Fordo, the military nuclear bunker. That's all I'm seeing called for. That's it. Now, there are those who have made the case very clearly that this is the end of President Trump, that Trump doing this is super unpopular. How could he just let Netanyahu do it? How could Trump say that Iran shouldn't have a nuke? Oh, this is just terrible, terrible stuff.
I actually really love Trump. I think he's a deeply humane, kind person. And I am saying this because I'm really afraid that my country's going to be further weakened by this. I think we're going to see the end of American empire, obviously. Other nations would like to see that, and this is a perfect way to scuttle the USS America on the shoals of Iran. But it's also going to end, I believe, Trump's presidency. And
I'm going to be honest with you guys. Scuttle the American empire? To who? I mean, seriously, to whom? To whom? I have a lot. I have a ton of respect for Tucker. I love a lot of the work that he's done. He's been very kind to me in my life. Nothing but kind things to say for a lot of what Tucker is saying. I just don't see this. The scuttling of the American empire, I'm not seeing it. I'm just not. The most I'm seeing called for is a couple of bombs dropped over the bunker in Fordo. Maybe a couple of fighter jet sorties. So far, I'm not seeing a whole lot elsewise. President Trump's response to this is, well, it's fantastic. It's very Trump. So a reporter asks Trump, well, what do you think about the comments made by Tucker Carlson?
I don't know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Let him go get a television network and say it so that people listen. Thank you.
Just going to be real with you guys. The argument that Donald Trump is not America first, the guy who brought the term back into being, the man who has given a lot up to, in fact, be the president of the United States, I just don't think that going to fight with Trump over this is going to work out well. I just don't. I know the idea that Israel is secretly controlling the U.S. and that it's just as goofy as the conspiracy theories over on the left side of the aisle. And it's just not going to resonate with Americans. It's not going to resonate with the Trump administration. I just don't see it as of this point. So that said, we're going to swing over to the commercial break for the radio crew. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Now, a few more on the quick news reaction side of things here before I let you go. And this would be that Mayor Johnson of Chicago has decided that after the federal government is likely to begin investigating him for his hiring practices, in which he openly told a group of people he only hired black women for a job, which is racial and sexual discrimination, absolutely. Now, Brandon Johnson has come out and said that on Juneteenth, that there are going to be grants given out only to black-owned businesses and black people, which again, violates the law. So, of course, what is the most unpopular mayor in the history of Chicago? An impressive record of Lori Lightfoot's to beat. Well, here he is bragging about it.
Our way will bring to black residents in reclaiming ownership of our own communities. That is the spirit of Juneteenth, you all. It is about reflecting on our past. other cultures are taught to never forget. We need to be reminded as blacks here in Chicago and America, remembering our past and working towards a more just future. Investing in black is not a criminal act.
Okay, so there's a very big difference between we need to learn from our history and unite as a country, which is a fine thing, to saying this means give money to black people only and specific city grants that only certain colors can apply to. They used to have certain grants that only certain people of certain colors could apply to. That was called Jim Crowism. He's all proud of himself. Oh, I'm such a good mayor with his 2% approval rating. Incredible, incredible stuff. J.B. Pritzker of Illinois has decided that he's a big tough guy. Well, he is a big guy. I don't know about tough guy, though. Pritzker's like, you come for any Illinoisans, you're going to have to go through me and the entire kitchen staff of my Golden Corral.
If Tom Homan were to come to try to arrest us, I can say, first of all, that he can try. I can also tell you that I will stand in the way of Tom Homan going after people who don't deserve to be frightened in their communities, who don't deserve to be threatened, terrorized. I would rather that he came and arrested me than do that to the people of my state.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I tell you, the more I see the same kind of nonsense the left trots out, the more I am just thrilled over it for him. So far they have, if you come enforce federal law, we'll fight you, which is polling horribly in the country. It really is a brutal, destitute zone for the left. But we got to talk about some of the immigration stuff, because there are serious things going on regarding the border, not just with Mexico, but with Canada and its seriously growing drug problem. Stick around. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on The Daily Signal.
If I could fall into the sky.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
The scoffing from coastal elites when you suggest that perhaps Canada might also have a drug problem. That kind of nonsense when you suggest that perhaps border security is good because powers that are unfriendly do, in fact, tend to provoke harm, chaos, and madness. And the latest series of studies on this comes out of the Consumer Choice Center. So we've got on David Clement to talk a little bit about this, the Mexican drug cartels, and what Canada has to do with it. David, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's just dig into this. I've seen kind of the study at a glance. Give us kind of a brief overview so we can dig in here.
Yeah, so basically, the Trump administration had raised a lot of grievances with Canada, both under Trudeau and the new Prime Minister Carney, about drugs flowing across the border. Peter Navarro had gone so far as saying that Canada has been taken over by the cartel. That is an exaggeration, but that prompted me to be like, okay, what is the administration seeing, right? And whatever somebody thinks of Trump or the Trump administration, Canada has a vested interest in actually getting the answer to that question, both for Canada-U.S. relations, but also for public safety. These guys are the worst of the worst in terms of criminals. They've been designated terrorist organizations. So I essentially took it upon myself to figure out, okay, where are they? How are they operating? What are they moving in Canada? Is the footprint for them growing? And how are they moving the products that they're selling? And that was essentially the task at hand. And what I found is, so no, Canada hasn't been overtaken by cartels, but it is a real problem. They're moving predominantly fentanyl, meth, cocaine, and illegal tobacco. Those
your
markets,
neighborhood Easter basket variety, sure.
yeah. I mean, there's upwards of $2.6 billion in economic black market activity there. And the craziest part is a lot of this stuff, it's not necessarily like your old school kind of selling out of the trunk of a car drug dealer. A lot of this stuff is just online, where it's like going to Amazon.com for drugs, and you order it and you pay via e-transfer and have this stuff delivered directly to your house via Canada Post. So it's a problem. It's a growing problem. And it's something that the Canadian government really needs to take serious action on for the two reasons I already said. Our greatest trading relationship with the U.S., but also public safety.
That's one of the things that I wanted to dial into here. So I've seen some of the busts that you've related in Alberta, as well as in Prince George in the fall of 24, essentially pointing out these large, again, variety bins of various drugs and also illegal cigarettes, some counterfeit money, some regular money, all kinds of suspected cutting agents and such. The busts in these cases were large, to the point of the RCMP suggesting that these drugs were certainly meant for further distribution beyond the region, which would indicate that the Sinaloa cartel and other associated cartels that are funneling these drugs throughout the prairie provinces, throughout the rest of Canada, are focusing on ways to improve and expand distribution, which, again, it's not a whether or not the cartels have gripped Canada firmly. It's that it is an exponential growth cycle. And that is going to, if it isn't quashed, it's going to get out of control really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we saw this all the time, more so under the Trudeau government, where they would say, yeah, but only like a certain amount of pounds was seized crossing the border into the U.S. Like it's a significantly smaller problem than coming north from Mexico, which is true. But one of the major super lab busts in British Columbia was producing enough fentanyl to kill every Canadian. And if that was just for the domestic market, the fentanyl crisis is bad. It would be apocalyptic if that was just for the domestic market. And so it has to be going somewhere.
Just as an example here, I really hate Canada's not as bad as Mexico, so therefore it must not be a problem. I hate that example because that's like suggesting, wow, I mean, talking to my wife, dear, did you see the mess that the kids made in the bathroom? It's horrible. And if she was to respond, yeah, but have you ever seen a truck stop bathroom?
Yeah.
Like, well, okay.
It's a low bar.
That's all right. I mean, yeah. I would sure hope that our house is not entertaining, the local loves. But I mean, hey, that doesn't mean that we should not put attention on the mess that has been made.
Correct.
And the fact that this is harming so many Canadians, so many Americans, and that what was once a border that could be left a little more open because of the strong brotherhood between the United States and Canada, because of these far left policies that have basically, I don't know the best way to put, like a set it and forget it kind of situation. It's created a massive problem that is now impacting our neighbors across the border either way, because far left-leaning set it and forget it policies, they don't just stay in that one neighborhood. Like you talked about in the report, they are built to expand beyond the regions where they have been allowed to fester.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. The truck stop bathroom is a great analogy because it's like, well, I mean, comparing us to Mexico isn't a particularly useful measure, given that is where the cartels literally are.
Yeah, I would sure hope that Canada is not a failed cartel state. My God.
Yeah. So I found the commentary from liberals in Canada and liberals in the United States as just kind of missing the point on what the problem is. And we can admit that there's a problem without admitting that Peter Navarro is right, that Canada has been overtaken cartels. It's not one or the other. It's
Peter Navarro, God bless him. I mean, Peter Navarro is the kind of guy that I think of Peter Navarro as kind of like the showroom TV out in front of the store.
Yeah.
It's always like turned up to volume 11. It's playing the wildest, craziest action scenes in order to draw people over to that TV. But I mean, you don't use your TV like that all the time. I personally think that Peter Navarro would be really excellent working somewhere else. And by that, I mean, unemployed. But anywho, back to the conversation on your particular reports here. There is a very strange series of expectations for border crossing, for market size, and the idea that just because Canada may only be currently doing about $2.68 billion Canadian in the kind of the drug market per year. Oh, well, that's not as big as a deal because in the United States, we're swapping billions in this industry and that industry all the time. I don't mean this in an insulting way. Well, the Canadian market is considerably smaller. So you have to consider how much larger of a percentage of the Canadian economy is doing business in this market. It really is a larger problem when you look at it at scale.
Yeah. A lot of people, you can't compare Canada and the United States as equals in the sense that they're both states or both countries, and therefore the problem south of the border is less than north of the border. We're a country that's 10 times smaller in population. And so when you see these numbers, if you were to extrapolate it
like
by
2.68 billion, I mean, hey, that goodness gracious, Ubisoft's latest game, was cutting something along the, you can make those kind of arguments, but like you said, when you multiply it by 10, all of the sudden, oh no, oh boy.
Well, I mean, the fentanyl market in the U.S. is earmarked anywhere between 2 and 4 billion, right? And so if we have now...
Oh no. I mean, you multiply that by a Canadian fentanyl market 10 times that of the market in the United States, again, adjusting for scale, things start to look really ugly, again, as a growing problem really quickly.
Yeah. And I can't stress this enough for why it matters. And in Canada, there's just a lot of opposition to Trump, and there's a knee-jerk reaction to say or to push back against everything he says. And I understand that sentiment in Canada. I think that the trade war is unnecessary. We are, in my opinion, the two closest of neighbors and best of friends.
I understand the rough position that a lot of Canadians, especially the Canadian conservatives, are in.
Yeah, but this is what I say to both conservatives and liberals in Canada. Regardless of what you think of Trump, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And even if
blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while.
And even if there's a sliver of truth here, we owe it to ourselves to get to the root of the problem and to stop cartel activity, moving fentanyl, cocaine, meth, and illegal tobacco, because everybody knows what happens when these guys come to town, and it's not good.
No, it's not at all. I really appreciate the kind of common sensibility that can come to terms with the idea that just because there's a guy that I don't like, if he says something true, that doesn't automatically make the statement false because I don't like the individual in question.
Correct.
And I think this is a kind of truth that, for example, Pennsylvania Senator and Democrat John Fetterman has come to terms with, that the left simply saying right now amid the Los Angeles riots, Fetterman has essentially walked out and said, yeah, guys, supporting the open borders and the riots, that's not good. Just because Trump says something doesn't mean you need to dive into a wood chipper. But it seems that there are individuals who are so desperate to achieve, I don't want to say a cultural, but kind of a personal victory over an individual. Like you're in an argument, you're in kind of a fight, you want the personal victory, that, like you said, they're missing the entire point. They are genuinely missing the forest for one half dead tree out in the field.
Yeah, and what in the Canadian context, what they're missing is that there are a variety of these online retailers who are shipping everything from cocaine to ketamine, MDMA, illegal tobacco, you name it, and using Canada Post and using major financial institutions to process these transactions. There's, other than someone instinctively knowing that these things are illegal, the user experience on these websites is just as it would be for buying shoes, right? These are real deal, sophisticated online retail outlets that are shipping en masse within Canada, moving products that we know the cartel is either responsible for making here or bringing to the country. It's like trying to have the moral high ground with Donald Trump and letting this slip under the radar is just a demonstrable failure.
I think so. And just to kind of close off that particular point in a way that I think is probably the most prescient, this is why the Canadian federal elections mattered. And essentially cutting off your nose to spite the face is going to cause a lot of problems. And something that Pierre Poilievre really brought forward in comprehensive of packages and ideas was, for example, the things that other products in Canada are being cut with. So you mentioned in the report a lot of things are being cut, like the tobacco is being cut with fentanyl. So you can say, oh, well, man, I'm just buying some illegal cigarettes. What's the problem? But, well, if they're cut with fentanyl, that may be the last cigarette you ever smoke. And so you have some serious issues. And the Canadian people heard one kind of pseudo-nationalist speech from your carny, your circus barker that's currently your prime minister, and said, oh, well, that's the guy that's going to flip off Trump. So that's the guy we're going to go with. And the problem still remains unsolved for Canadians. And then by extension, those in the United States who suffer from things coming across the border.
Yeah. And I mean, on the example of cigarettes, which was the most surprising to me, but it makes sense because the black market for that, depending on the province, is upwards of like 50%. So the reason why that matters is that's predominantly run through Indigenous reserves. And these are the people who have gotten the worst deal forever. That is where poverty is the most rampant. These people have been left behind by Ottawa for a century. The last thing our government should ever let happen is for the cartels to move in and make their circumstances even worse. And we've spent an incredible amount of time in Canada trying to talk about how do we lift these communities up? How do we get them on their own 2 feet? This is Pierre Poilievre's, how do we get out of the way? How do we turn these Indigenous reserves into the most prosperous places in the country? Well, I can tell you it's not letting the cartels infiltrate. That's not in the playbook.
I mean, again, what seems like common sense has been discarded in order to say Orange Man bad, and that's not going to be something that's again long-term effective. But again, we can hope that this kind of a study does in fact break some of the open ground. David Clement from Consumer Choice Center, thank you very much for spending a bit of time with us and breaking this down.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks very much for tuning in. Remember to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We'll be with you real soon. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. A lot sooner. I'm afraid there's some breaking news we got to get to. But first, if you or a loved one are turning 65 soon, you're going to want to hear how our partner, Chapter Medicare, is saving people thousands of dollars. Unfortunately, being the government boondoggle that it is, Medicare enrollment is a maze of misinformation. And the victims are everyday Americans, parents, grandparents, including those of Chapter's co-founders. That's why they've vowed to go the extra mile by doing right by their customers. Chapter's advisors listen carefully, they compare every plan, and they help you maximize the savings. People are relieved when they talk to Chapter, even making a typically annoying process rather easy and even enjoyable. Working with Chapter is simple, it helps save a ton of money, and saves you days and days of research. These guys aren't going to push you to buy a plan that you don't want, so their support being completely free. If you're turning 65 soon, call them up. You won't regret it. In fact, most people only regret not calling Chapter first. So call the number on the screen. That's 415-787-4074 or visit askchapter.org/Tony. You'll be glad that you did. Now, let's head over to just a bit of breaking news that we've got here. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, has left the G7 just outside of Calgary in Alberta. And according to Carolyn Leavitt, the press secretary of the White House, even though he has signed a major trade deal with Keir Starmer today, a lot accomplished, because of what's going on in the Middle East, President Trump will be leaving tonight after dinner with the heads of state, and Trump has convened the National Security Council back at Washington, D.C. when he arrives. There's a lot of speculation going on as to what this means. So here's what's going on in Israel and Iran at the moment. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, their pseudo army and civilian beatdown crew, is under direct bombardment. Natanz is also under attack, the primary nuclear enrichment facility. There are rumors that some types of lesser bunker busters are in employment. A lot of this stuff so far is, well, just as much as we can give you. We're not going to try to give you all of the speculation in the world. Now, there are a lot of social media situations that are trending. A lot of people are saying, I'm not here to die for Israel. And by the way, I agree. We shouldn't be dying for Israel. So far, I'm not seeing anyone asking us to. Now, if there is a moment in which people suddenly start saying, you know what, George Bush was right. Maybe we should go in and occupy Iran for 20 or 30 years and not accomplish anything. Okay, I will absolutely call that out if and when that gets here. So far, I'm not seeing it. I'm just not. And so it is fun as it is to say that right now there's this secret cabal of neocons that are trying to Dick Cheney our way into another long war. Again, I'm not seeing it. Right now, and I believe this to be a particularly important note, is that the arguments of individuals like Senator Carlton of Arkansas, in which Iran has provided a very present threat via its own sources and militia to trade not just with Israel, but to other Arabic countries in the region that were a cornerstone of President Trump's first administration trade deals. I'm gonna argue this as far as Trump is concerned. Let the man cook. I heard this with Soleimani in the first administration. I've heard this consistently, that we're always somehow on the brink of this, that, and the other. Syria, Iraq, Russia, other countries as such have in fact abandoned Iran. China flew like one pallet of replacement, like launch sequence parts into Iran, and already that is apparently trickling out faster than an old man going to the bathroom. So what does that mean for us? Well, China has officially called on all of its citizens to leave the region. So this would include Iran, this would include Israel. Of course, various state departments around the world are saying, hey, everyone should probably pull out of the region. And again, as far as we know so far, the secret insights and outsights of who's doing what, when, where, how, and why, we don't know. All of the punditry class in the world can play Monday morning quarterback after the events. Hindsight's 2020. Everyone can suggest right now that secret groups are being puppeteered by this one or by that one or special super secret interests. We don't know. At least here on the Tony Kinnett Cast. And we're not going to try to feed you a bunch of, well, actually, it's a secret super process by... No. Not really interesting to me. What I am interested, however, in is making sure we give you the latest updates. So before we go tonight, throw a subscribe over on the YouTube channel. That really helps us out. We'd love to see you back here again, especially those who, despise us. Your comments are typically the funniest. I'm Tony Kinnett. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and first on 93 WIBC. Take care.